12 times. I counted exactly. 12 packages disappeared from my front porch in 3 months. This time, it was a Park Tool bike repair kit worth $140, ordered from REI, delivered at 2:47 p.m. on September 3rd. I knew the exact time because my Ring doorbell camera captured everything. And I also knew exactly who took it. Barbara Fenwick, the HOA board president of our neighborhood, was smiling on the screen, waving at the camera like she was greeting a friendly neighbor, then walking away with the box in her hands. But today, the box I left on my porch didn't contain real merchandise. Inside was something that would make her regret everything. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. This payback is just getting started. That robbery, the Park Tool at 2:47 p.m. on September 3rd, was the final straw. This morning, I set a trap. I stood at my front door now, coffee mug in hand, replaying the footage from that theft one more time. The Ring footage was indisputable. She smiled, waved into the lens, and said, "Hello there, neighbor," as if she were doing me a favor by stealing my property. I watched it again and felt my stomach drop, not from shock anymore, but from cold anger. This wasn't just theft. This was power. This was someone who believed they were untouchable because they wore a title and carried a clipboard at neighborhood meetings. My name is Isaac Palmer. I'm 44 years old, a data analyst for a health insurance company, and I work from home in a modest townhouse at Pinehurst Commons, a planned community of 140 homes where the HOA fee is $85 a month. I moved here 8 months ago after my divorce, looking for a fresh start, somewhere quiet and simple. What I got instead was Barbara Fenwick. She was 51, blonde hair always styled, pastel cardigans and gold-rimmed glasses, and she'd been board president for 3 years. Her power was absolute when Mrs. Diane Paulson, a 58-year-old teacher, told me in August that Barbara had taken her gardening tools and never returned them, claiming safekeeping. Diane wouldn't file a complaint. "She's the president. Isaac," Diane whispered over her fence. "Who's going to believe me over her?" That was the atmosphere Barbara cultivated. Fear dressed up as community spirit. I pulled up my spreadsheet, the one I'd been keeping since June 15th. 12 rows, 12 dates and times. Total value $1,847. The first package was a set of kitchen knives. $42. I thought maybe FedEx delivered it wrong. The second was a book. $28. I assumed Porch Pirates. By the third, a wireless keyboard for $65. I checked my camera footage. That's when I saw her. Barbara Fenwick, 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, taking my package like it was hers. I called the local police. Officer Martinez came by, watched the video, sighed, and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Palmer, but we need more than one incident to pursue charges. It could be a misunderstanding." I asked him, "Does it look like a misunderstanding when she waves at the camera?" He just shrugged. That shrug permitted me to stop asking. It permitted me to act. I documented everything. I contacted Amazon, and they refunded me, but told me they couldn't take legal action on my behalf. I posted anonymously on the neighborhood forum asking if anyone else had missing packages. 3 people messaged me privately, then 5, then 11. By the time I stopped counting, 18 households admitted they'd lost packages in the past 8 months, right after Barbara became president. Most were too scared to say anything publicly. That's when I realized this wasn't about stolen packages. This was about a system that protected the powerful and silenced the weak. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I opened my laptop and searched for federal mail theft laws. It didn't take long. Title 18, United States Code, Section 1708, Theft or receipt of stolen mail. A federal crime, punishable by a fine of up to $250,000 or up to 5 years in prison, or both. I took a screenshot, saved it in a folder labeled Evidence, and felt something shift inside me. For the first time in 3 months, I wasn't helpless. I had a plan. I wasn't going to yell or threaten or confront her in the street. I was going to be smarter. I was going to build a case so airtight that even Barbara Fenwick's smile couldn't save her. The law was on my side. I just needed proof she couldn't deny. I looked at the small Amazon box sitting on my desk, the one I'd assembled that morning. It looked identical to any other package, complete with a printed shipping label addressed to me. But inside, there was no merchandise. Inside was a custom-built glitter bomb kit, 4 hidden cameras to record when the box opened, 1 Bluetooth speaker, and a tiny AirTag GPS tracker. I'd spent $187 building it, watching tutorials, testing every component. The glitter was bright pink, the kind used at bachelorette parties, the kind that stuck to hair and clothes for weeks. The fart spray canister was industrial strength, and the speaker, when triggered, would play a very clear message. This package is being tracked. Smile for the camera. Mail theft is a federal crime under 18 U.S.C. 17-1708. The AirTag would tell me where she took it. The Ring doorbell would show her taking it. The 4 cameras inside would capture her reaction when she opened it. I placed the box on my porch at 10 a.m., exactly where Barbara would see it from her house across the street. Then I got in my car, drove 2 blocks away, and parked. I opened the Find My app on my iPhone. The green dot pulsed steadily. The AirTag was active. I opened the Ring app. The camera was recording. I took a deep breath and waited. It was now 11:17 a.m. I had no idea how long it would take, but I knew with absolute certainty that Barbara Fenwick wouldn't be able to resist, and when she took the bait, I'd have everything I needed. Not just to prove she was a thief, but to prove she'd been stealing from this entire neighborhood for months. I leaned back in my seat, phone in hand, heart pounding. This wasn't revenge. This was evidence. And evidence, I was about to learn, was the most powerful weapon of all. 2 days later, I sat in the Daily Grind, a coffee shop 3 miles from home, with my MacBook open and a fresh spreadsheet glowing on the screen. I wasn't a detective, but I was a data analyst, and data didn't lie. The glitter bomb had worked exactly as planned. At 2:47 p.m. on September 5th, 2 days after the park tool theft, Barbara took the bait. The Ring doorbell captured her approaching my porch, glancing left and right, then picking up the box with that same satisfied smile. She carried it back to her house, number 47, and disappeared inside. I sat parked 2 blocks away, phone in hand, watching the live feed. My heart was pounding. 6 minutes later, at 2:53 p.m., my phone lit up with notifications. The 4 cameras inside the box had activated. I tapped the screen and watched the show begin. The footage was better than I'd imagined. Barbara sat on her beige living room sofa, the kind with decorative pillows that matched the curtains, and placed my package on the glass coffee table in front of her. She was smiling, that smug little smile of someone who thought they'd gotten away with something clever. She used scissors to cut the packing tape carefully, like she was unwrapping a gift. Then she lifted the lid. For a split second, nothing happened. She leaned forward, squinting into the box, confused by what she saw. Then the servo motor inside activated with a mechanical whir. The glitter bomb detonated like a pastel grenade. 50 grams of bright pink glitter exploded upward in a shimmering cloud, coating her face, her hair, her pastel cardigan, the sofa, the coffee table, the cream-colored carpet. At the same moment, the fart spray canister triggered, releasing a concentrated burst of industrial-strength stench that smelled like a combination of rotten eggs and burning rubber. And then, like the cherry on top of a very ugly sundae, bright blue dye packs burst open, spraying her hands, her arms, and the front of her shirt with vivid cobalt streaks that looked like she'd been tagged by a bank robbery alarm. Barbara screamed, not a polite scream, a full-throated primal shriek of horror and rage. She leaped off the sofa, glitter raining from her hair like confetti at a nightmare wedding, and tried to bat the cloud away with her hands. That only made it worse. The glitter stuck to her skin, her clothes, her jewelry. The dye spread across her palms in bright blue smears. The smell hit her a second later, and she gagged, covering her mouth with one dyed hand, which only transferred more blue onto her face. Then the Bluetooth speaker inside the box crackled to life and played the message I'd recorded in my calmest, most clinical voice. This package is being tracked. Smile for the camera. Mail theft is a federal crime under 18 U.S.C. 17-1708. You have been recorded. Barbara froze. Her eyes, wide and wild, darted to the box on the table. She bent down, glitter falling from her hair in pink cascades, and saw them. 4 tiny cameras, each no bigger than a thumb drive, mounted inside the box, blinking red recording lights aimed directly at her face. I watched all of this from my car, 2 blocks away, phone screen glowing in my lap, and I started laughing. Not loud, not manic, just a low, relieved laugh that felt like pressure releasing from a valve I didn't know I'd been holding shut for 3 months. She stumbled backward, tripping over her own feet, and fell onto the sofa in a cloud of glitter and shame. Then she did exactly what I knew she would do. She panicked. She grabbed the box and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a thud and fell behind a potted plant, but the cameras kept recording. She ran to the bathroom. I could hear water running through the audio feed, hear her cursing under her breath, words I'd never heard a HOA president use in public. She came back moments later with a towel, scrubbing at her face, but the dye didn't come off. Neither did the glitter. It was in her hair, stuck to her eyelashes, embedded in the fabric of her cardigan. The smell lingered thick in the air, and she opened a window, coughing and waving her hands like she could push the stench outside by sheer force of will. But here's the thing that made me stop laughing and start taking this seriously again. At 3:05 p.m., 24 minutes after the explosion, Barbara didn't throw the box away. She walked back over to where it had landed, picked it up carefully, avoiding the camera's lines of sight, and carried it out of the frame. The audio feed picked up the sound of a door opening, footsteps, a car door, and an engine starting. I immediately opened the Find My app on my phone. The green dot representing the AirTag inside the box began moving. I watched it trace a route east, away from Pinehurst Commons, along Route 36, and then stop at a location 3 miles away. The coordinates placed it at Pinehurst Self-Storage. She hadn't thrown the evidence away. She'd taken it somewhere to hide it. And that told me everything I needed to know. If Barbara was storing a glitter-bombed decoy box, she was storing other stolen packages too. I screenshot the map, noted the timestamp, and saved it to my evidence folder. Then I did something that felt reckless but necessary. I drove to Pinehurst Self-Storage myself. The facility was a grid of orange metal units behind a chain-link fence, the kind of place people rent when they run out of closet space or need to hide things they don't want found. I parked near the front office and walked inside. A woman in her 60s with bifocals and a name tag reading Brenda looked up from a crossword puzzle and said, "Help you?" I smiled, kept my voice casual, and said I was trying to locate a package that had been mistakenly delivered to a storage unit in this area earlier today, around 3 p.m. She frowned, checked her computer, and said we had one vehicle entry at 3:07 p.m., Unit C-19, rented under the name Barbara Fenwick. I thanked her, said I'd contact the renter directly, and walked out before she could ask more questions. Unit C-19, I had the exact location, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that inside that unit was more than just one glitter-bombed box. Inside was evidence of months of theft, and I was going to make sure it saw the light of day. I spent the next 3 days building a case that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't anger anymore. This was precision. I created a master timeline in Excel with 4 tabs my stolen packages. Neighbor reports totaling 22 households and 47 packages. HOA financials showing $11,400 siphoned through the fake Greenleaf landscaping invoices. And the glitter bomb incident with video files, GPS tracker data, and the storage unit address where the AirTag had led me. Then I printed everything. I didn't trust digital files alone. I wanted physical proof, the kind you could spread across a table in front of a prosecutor and say, "Here, Look at this. This is real. I bought a 3-ring binder, the heavy-duty kind, with clear plastic sleeves, and began assembling the evidence page by page. Each incident got its own section with a printed cover sheet, color-coded by category. Red for theft, blue for financial fraud, green for witness testimony. I included still frames from the Ring doorbell showing Barbara's face clearly, her smile, her wave, and the boxes in her hands. By the time I finished, the case folder was 2 inches thick and heavy with truth, but I knew documentation alone wouldn't be enough to open a storage unit. I needed legal authority. Inspector Moss had made that clear. So I researched how to request a federal search warrant. The standard was probable cause, a reasonable belief that a crime had been committed and that evidence of that crime was located in a specific place. I had video proof of Barbara stealing my package. I had 22 witnesses reporting similar thefts. I had financial records showing embezzlement. And I had GPS data showing stolen property being transported to Pinehurst Self-Storage, Unit C-19. The unit number I'd confirmed with the storage manager. That was more than probable cause. That was a roadmap. I called Inspector Moss again on September 8th at 9:30 a.m. and told him I had everything he needed. He asked me to bring the file to the local postal inspection office the next morning, on September 9th at 10 a.m. I walked into a bland government building on the east side of town, carrying my evidence binder like it mattered more than anything I'd ever held. Inspector Moss met me in a small conference room with white walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. He was in his mid-50s, with graying hair, sharp eyes, the kind of man who'd seen every scam and scheme imaginable and had stopped being surprised years ago. He gestured to a chair and said, "Show me what you've got." I opened the binder and walked him through it, section by section. He didn't interrupt. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally leaning forward to study a photo or a receipt. When I got to the glitter bomb video, I played it on my laptop. He watched Barbara's face twist from smug satisfaction to horror as pink glitter erupted across her living room, and for the first time since I'd met him, Inspector Moss smiled. He said, "Mr. Palmer, this is one of the most thorough civilian investigations I've ever seen. You've got motive, means, opportunity, and a clear pattern of behavior. The financial fraud complicates things in a good way, because it shows this isn't just opportunistic theft. This is organized, sustained criminal activity. I'm going to take this file to the U.S. Attorney's Office and request a warrant to search Unit C-19. If we find what I think we're going to find, we'll have enough to charge her federally under 18 U.S.C. 08 for mail theft, and probably under state law for embezzlement and fraud. But I need you to do one thing for me. I need you to stay quiet. Don't post this anywhere. Don't tell your neighbors yet. Don't confront Barbara. If she gets wind of an investigation, she'll clean out that storage unit, and we'll lose everything. Can you do that?" I nodded. I said, "I've waited 3 months. I can wait a few more days." He stood, shook my hand, and said he'd be in touch within 72 hours. I left the building and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. I'd done everything I could. Now waiting felt like holding my breath at the edge of justice, because I knew, somewhere in Unit C-19, there were boxes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, packages stolen from families who thought they'd never see justice. And soon, very soon, the door to that unit was going to open. And when it did, Barbara Fenwick's carefully constructed world was going to collapse. 3 days passed in excruciating slow motion. I went through the motions of normal life, working from home, attending virtual meetings, pretending everything was fine. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time my phone buzzed, I grabbed it, hoping for a message from Inspector Moss. Every time I looked out my window, I saw Barbara across the street, watering her roses, chatting with neighbors, performing neighborly warmth like a mask. She had no idea the net was closing around her. On September 12th at 2:15 p.m., my phone finally rang. It was Inspector Moss. He said, "We got the warrant. We're executing it tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I want you there. Not inside the unit, but nearby. You started this investigation, and you deserve to see it through. Bring a witness if you want. Someone from the neighborhood who's been affected. It might help later when we need testimony. I called Mrs. Diane Paulson immediately. Her voice was shaky when she answered. I told her what was happening, that federal agents were going to open Barbara's storage unit tomorrow, that I wanted her there as a witness. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Isaac, I'm scared. What if this goes wrong? What if Barbara finds out I helped you?" I understood her fear. Barbara had spent 3 years building a reputation as untouchable, as someone who could punish dissent with fines, violations, and social isolation. But I also knew that fear was exactly how people like Barbara stayed in power. I said, "Diane, tomorrow we either let her keep getting away with it, or we stand up and prove that no one is above the law. Your choice." She took a breath and said, "I'll be there." September 13th arrived cold and overcast, the kind of morning that felt heavy with anticipation. I picked up Diane at 9:30 a.m., and we drove together to Pinehurst Self-Storage in silence. She clutched her purse in her lap like a lifeline. When we arrived, Inspector Moss was already there, along with 2 other federal agents and Officer Martinez from the local police department. Moss nodded at me and said, "Stay by the vehicle. Don't approach the unit until we've cleared it." I parked 50 feet away, where I had a clear line of sight to Unit C-19. The metal door was painted orange, streaked with rust, and padlocked shut. Moss approached with bolt cutters, snapped the lock, and pulled the door open with a metallic screech that echoed across the lot. What happened next felt like watching a dam break. The storage unit was packed floor to ceiling with boxes. Not just a few. Over 200 packages, stacked on metal shelving units, organized by size and type, like some kind of twisted warehouse. Most were still sealed, labels intact, addresses visible. I saw names I recognized, neighbors from Pinehurst Commons, people from the adjacent community of Maplewood Estates. There were Amazon boxes, Target bags, Chewy shipments, and REI parcels. Inspector Moss stepped inside and began photographing and documenting each package methodically. Officer Martinez looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between disbelief and vindication. Then Moss emerged holding a piece of paper, a printed spreadsheet taped at eye level inside the unit like a warehouse checklist. It was labeled Inventory List, 230 items, estimated resale value, and target selling price, total projected revenue, $50,000. Moss walked over to where Diane and I stood and handed me the paper. He said she wasn't just stealing packages. She was running a business. Look at this. She had it organized by category, by estimated value, by full potential. She was planning to sell all of it. Some of these boxes are 8 months old. She's been doing this since she became HOA president. Diane covered her mouth with her hand and whispered, "Oh my God." I stared at the spreadsheet, at the meticulous columns, the calculated greed, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated. Systematic theft on a scale I hadn't fully grasped until now, and she'd done it all while holding clipboard meetings and lecturing neighbors about community standards. Moss said, "We're going to need statements from both of you. And Isaac, I'm going to need that glitter bomb footage officially entered into evidence. This is going to trial. We've got her on federal mail theft, multiple counts, and the state will probably add embezzlement and fraud for the HOA financials. Conservatively, she's looking at 3 to 5 years of federal time plus restitution. Her reign is over." I nodded slowly, letting the reality sink in. Officer Martinez approached and said, "We're going to her house now to make the arrest. Do you want to be there?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to see her face when the handcuffs went on. But another part of me, the part that had spent 3 months being methodical and controlled, knew that witnessing her humiliation wouldn't change anything. What mattered was knowing the system had worked, that the law had responded not to anger, but to evidence. I said, "No, I don't need to be there. I've already seen everything I needed to see." Moss shook my hand and said, "You did good work, Mr. Palmer. Most people would have given up or tried to handle this themselves in ways that would have landed them in trouble. You trusted the process. And you built a case we can actually use. That matters." I thanked him, got back in the car with Diane, and drove away from Pinehurst Self-Storage. 3 months of work had led to this moment. Behind us, agents cataloged the stolen boxes. Ahead of us, Barbara was about to learn that titles and clipboards can't protect you from consequences. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The morning after the storage unit raid, I woke up to 17 missed calls. Most were from neighbors I barely knew, people who'd suddenly remembered my name now that Barbara's arrest was public knowledge. The local news had picked up the story overnight. Federal agents raid storage unit in HOA President package theft ring. I didn't answer any of the calls. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop to finish what I'd started. Because the storage unit was only half the story. The other half was buried in the HOA financials, and I needed to make sure Inspector Moss and the prosecutors had every piece of evidence to guarantee Barbara couldn't weasel out of this with a plea deal that let her walk away with a slap on the wrist. I pulled up the HOA budget file that Walter Green had reluctantly given me weeks ago and started digging deeper. The $11,400 funneled through the fake Greenleaf landscaping invoices was obvious fraud. But I had a feeling there was more. After 3 hours of cross-checking HOA vendor payments, a pattern of fake companies emerged. 6 additional payments labeled Community Improvement Fund, totaling another $3,200, all made to vendors that didn't exist. Sunrise Property Services, Home Care Solutions, Pinehurst Security Consulting. I ran each through the Colorado Secretary of State Business Registry. None were registered. Barbara had been creating fake invoices and forging Walter's signature for over a year. That brought the total HOA theft to $14,600 and overall losses to more than $61,000. I called Inspector Moss at 11 a.m. He answered on the second ring, his voice tired, but satisfied. I told him I'd found more, another $3,200 embezzled under fake vendor names, and that I was sending the spreadsheet immediately. Moss was quiet for a moment, then said, "Isaac, you just added another felony charge to her case. State-level embezzlement of over $10,000 is a Class 3 felony in Colorado. That's 2 to 6 years, combined with the federal mail theft charges. She's looking at real prison time, not probation." I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. I asked him what happened during the arrest. He said we brought her in yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m. She tried to play innocent at first, said the storage unit wasn't hers, that someone must have set her up. Then we showed her the rental contract with her signature, her credit card on file, and the surveillance footage from the storage facility showing her entering Unit C, -19 4 times in the past week. She broke down, started crying, saying she needed the money, that she had gambling debts she couldn't pay. That was it. The hidden motive I'd suspected, but hadn't been able to prove. Barbara wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. Moss continued. She admitted to stealing packages over the past 8 months and selling the contents to pay off online gambling debts totaling $34,000. She said it started small, just 1 or 2 packages, and then it got out of control. She kept thinking the next score would be enough to get her out of the hole, but it never was. Moss added their classic addict behavior. We also found records on her phone showing she'd been selling items through an account called Home Sweet Deals. Made 87 transactions in 8 months. Total revenue of $8,400. But that wasn't nearly enough to cover what she owed. So she started taking HOA money too, creating fake landscaping and service invoices to cover her tracks. She thought no one would notice because no one ever questioned her authority. I asked what happened next. Moss said she's been formally charged with federal mail theft under 18 U.S.C. 008, which carries up to 5 years, and Colorado embezzlement, which adds another 2 to 6 years. The U.S. attorney is pushing for consecutive sentences because of the scale and premeditation. She'll also have to pay full restitution, about $61,000 total, covering the value of stolen packages, the embezzled HOA funds, and interest. Her husband filed for divorce this morning. Her son, who's 22 and lives with them, told investigators he had no idea what she was doing. We believe him. Barbara's being held on $1 bail. She can't make it. She's staying in the county jail until trial. I let that information sink in. Jail, divorce, federal charges. Everything she'd built, the authority, the carefully curated image of the perfect neighborhood leader. All of it gone in less than 24 hours. Moss said, "Isaac, I need you to know something. This case is going to trial, probably in 3 months. You'll be called as a witness. So will Mrs. Paulson and the other neighbors. The defense is going to try to paint you as someone with a vendetta, someone who set Barbara up because you didn't like her authority. You need to be ready for that. Are you?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready. I didn't set her up. I documented what she did. There's a difference." Moss made a sound that might have been approval. "Good. Stay in touch. If you find anything else, let me know. The prosecutors love working with organized plaintiffs. You've made their job a lot easier." He hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my laptop screen, at the spreadsheets and files and evidence I'd compiled over 3 months. I closed the computer and walked to the window. Across the street, Barbara's house sat empty and dark. No roses are being watered. No clipboard inspections. No fake smiles. Just silence. And for the first time in months, that silence felt like peace. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Inspector Moss again. In that time, Pinehurst Commons went through what I can only describe as a collective reckoning. The HOA called an emergency meeting on September 25th at 7 p.m., and for the first time in 3 years, Barbara Fenwick's chair at the head of the table sat empty. Walter Green and Linda Morris, the treasurer and secretary who'd signed Barbara's fake invoices without question, both resigned immediately. That left the board with 2 remaining members and a neighborhood full of angry residents demanding answers. Mrs. Diane Paulson stood up during the meeting, her voice shaking but steady, and said, "I want Isaac Palmer on this board. He's the only one who dared to do what was right." The room erupted in applause. I hadn't planned on taking any leadership role. I just wanted my packages to stop disappearing. But when 60 hands went up voting for me, I realized this wasn't about authority. It was about accountability, so I accepted. The first thing we did as the new board was hire an independent auditor to review every HOA transaction from the past 3 years. The results came back on October 8th, and they were worse than I'd expected. Barbara hadn't just been stealing for the past year. She'd been skimming since she became president, routing funds through fake vendors, inflating maintenance costs, and pocketing the difference. The total came to $22,000. The auditor's report was forwarded to Inspector Moss and the prosecutors immediately. But the new audit changed everything. Barbara's lawyer had tried to negotiate a plea deal, offering to plead guilty to a single count of mail theft in exchange for probation and community service. The U.S. Attorney's Office rejected it outright. They wanted a trial. They wanted a public record of what she'd done. On October 12th, I received a formal subpoena to testify at Barbara's preliminary hearing scheduled for November 2nd. The notice arrived by certified mail, official and final, and it made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. I'd built the case, handed over the evidence, and watched her get arrested. But now I was going to have to stand in a courtroom, raise my right hand, and tell a judge exactly what happened. I called Inspector Moss to ask what I should expect. He said, "The defense is going to try to discredit you. They'll say you had a personal grudge, that the glitter bomb was entrapment, that you manipulated evidence. You need to stay calm, stick to the facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. Don't get emotional. Don't get defensive. Just tell the truth. The truth is on your side." I asked if he thought she'd take a plea before trial. He said, "Honestly, no. Her lawyer knows the evidence is overwhelming, but Barbara still thinks she can talk her way out of this. She's been in control for so long. She doesn't know how to accept that it's over. November 2nd arrived cold and gray. I wore a suit, dark blue, the one I'd bought for job interviews years ago and rarely worn since. Mrs. Diane Paulson met me outside the courthouse at 8:45 a.m. She was testifying too, representing the other victims. We walked in together, through metal detectors and security checkpoints, and into a courtroom that smelled like old wood and floor polish. Barbara was already there, sitting at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive briefcase, sat beside her whispering instructions. When I walked in, Barbara looked up. Our eyes met for just a second. There was no defiance, just exhaustion. The hearing lasted 4 hours. I was called to the stand at 9:30 a.m. and spent 90 minutes walking the prosecutor through my evidence, the timeline of stolen packages, the Ring doorbell footage, the glitter bomb deployment, the GPS tracking data leading to Unit C-19. The HOA financial records show fake vendors and embezzlement. The defense attorney cross-examined me for another 40 minutes, trying to poke holes in my story, suggesting I had set Barbara up out of spite. Moss's warning echoed in my head. I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak for itself. At one point, the defense attorney held up a printout of the glitter bomb video and said, "Mr. Palmer, isn't it true that you built this device specifically to humiliate Mrs. Fenwick?" I looked at him and said, "No, I built it to document a federal crime. If she felt humiliated, that's because she committed one." The prosecutor smiled. The judge did not. When the hearing ended, the judge took less than 10 minutes to deliver her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, there is probable cause to believe that the defendant, Barbara Ann Fenwick, committed multiple counts of mail theft under 18 U.S.C. 008, as well as embezzlement and fraud under Colorado state law. The defendant is bound over for trial. Trial date is set for January 15th. Bail remains at $50,000. The court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the room. Barbara's shoulders slumped. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something, but she didn't respond. 2 bailiffs approached to escort her back to the county jail. Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharp and cold. Diane turned to me and said, "We did it." I nodded. "Not yet," I said, "but we're close." January 15th came faster than I expected. The trial lasted 3 days, but it felt like 3 months compressed into a single exhausting blur of testimony. Evidence presentation and legal procedure. I sat in the gallery watching as the prosecution laid out the case I'd built piece by piece. They displayed the Ring doorbell footage on a large courtroom monitor, showing Barbara taking my packages with that confident smile. They played the glitter bomb video, and even the judge cracked a faint smile when the pink cloud erupted across Barbara's living room. They presented the GPS tracking data, the storage unit photos showing 230 stolen packages stacked like inventory in a warehouse, and the HOA financial records proving $22,000 in embezzlement. The defense tried to argue that Barbara was suffering from gambling addiction, that she needed treatment, not prison, that she was a victim of her own compulsion. But the prosecution countered with cold facts. This wasn't impulsive theft. This was organized, systematic fraud conducted over 18 months while she held a position of trust in the community. On January 18th at 2 p.m., the jury returned after 4 hours of deliberation. The foreman, a middle-aged man in a gray sweater, stood and read the verdict. "We find the defendant, Barbara Ann Fenwick, guilty on all counts. 12 counts of federal mail theft, 4 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of fraud." The courtroom was silent. Barbara sat perfectly still, her face blank. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she didn't react. The judge set sentencing for February 10th and remanded her to custody without bail. As the bailiffs led her out, Barbara glanced back once, not at her lawyer or her family, but at me. It wasn't anger. It was resignation. She'd always known that eventually someone would refuse to look away. 3 weeks later, sentencing day arrived. I sat in the same courtroom, this time with Mrs. Diane Paulson, Mr. Ed Holloway, and 14 other neighbors whose packages Barbara had stolen. The judge reviewed the sentencing report, the victim impact statements, and the probation office's recommendation. Then she spoke. Mrs. Fenwick, you held a position of trust in your community, and you exploited that trust for personal gain. You stole from your neighbors, not out of desperation, but out of entitlement. You believed your authority made you untouchable. It did not. I hereby sentence you to 3 years in federal prison for mail theft, to be followed by 2 years in state prison for embezzlement and fraud. Sentences to run consecutively. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $61,000 to your victims and the Pinehurst Commons HOA. You will be prohibited from holding any HOA board position for life. The court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Barbara was led away. This time, she didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, the neighbors who'd come to witness the sentencing gathered on the steps. Someone suggested we all go to lunch, celebrate the end of this nightmare. But I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt relieved and at peace. Diane touched my arm and said, "Isaac, you gave us our voices back. You showed us we didn't have to be afraid." I nodded, not trusting myself to say much, as everyone dispersed. I stood alone for a moment, looking up at the gray stone building where justice had finally been served. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo the theft or the fear or the months of feeling powerless, but it proved something I'd needed to believe, that one person refusing to stay silent could change everything. Here's what I learned from all of this. When someone abuses power, document everything. Stay calm. Build your case with facts, not emotion. Use the tools available to you, whether it's a doorbell camera or a spreadsheet. And most importantly, don't let fear of authority stop you from doing what's right, because the moment you speak up, you permit others to do the same. Barbara Fenwick served her time. I got my piece. And Pinehurst Commons got a new HOA board that actually answers to the people it serves. Sometimes karma doesn't just happen. You build it, one piece of evidence at a time. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt powerless against someone who thought they were untouchable, support. Karma Neighbors. We share real stories of people standing up for what's right. Hit that button. Share this story. And let's keep building a community where accountability matters. Because in the end, justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one has to stand on their porch watching their packages disappear, wondering if anyone will listen. And now you know. Someone will.